Hello, it's Matt Key with True Gamer Goggles, and we are going to talk about Coalition Wars Cyber Knights. This is the fourth book of the Coalition Wars campaign books setting. Yeah, again, fourth book. Not at all what I expected. We'll get to that. So, the book starts off with Sergeant Dion doing his normal video home to his wife, and he's talking about how in the last chapter of the Coalition Wars, the Coalition kind of got their butts kicked and they're on the run, and this white witch appears before them. Kind of the way the story's told, I kind of get the impression she's kind of being the diabolical cat playing with a mouse type of thing. That's like, I am the one in power and I'm just going to obliterate you when I'm done having fun. That is the impression I got from his story. And his story is so good because it puts so much in perspective for everything. And just as she's about to wipe out the Coalition, I don't know if it was a company, a squad, a battalion, or what, 6 Cyber Knights jump in, and she basically tells them to back off, and then there's a blinding flash, and we'll come back to that. Now we're going to talk about the Cyber Knights, because this book is really about the Cyber Knights. In fact, this book is so much about Cyber Knights, it's kind of out of place in the Coalition Wars. But it was an appropriate time to put it in with all of the knowledge, because everything that defines the Cyber Knights for what they are today happened at the moment in time of Sergeant Dion's story. So it's not like you could do a Fall of the Cyber Knights or a Cyber Knight Uprising book like they did with the Juicer Uprising. It really belongs here, as out of place as it seems that it's kind of like a chapter. It's more like it's almost like it should be an addendum. But there's so much knowledge on Cyber Knights in this book that it puts it in pure perspective. So basically, we're going to go back to what Cyber Knights are. They're accepted by everyone. And they accept everyone. Okay, wait. Let me say that again. They're not accepted by everyone. The Coalition's been fighting them, right? So they're not accepted by everyone, but they accept all. So what's their story? What makes them tick? Wilderness people really love the Cyber Knights. Every community that the Cyber Knights touch, they I don't know if influence is the right word, but they're accepted by that culture over time, and they have influences, and they protect those people because they fight for justice and well-being over all things. It doesn't matter if you worship Muhammad or God or Doctor Who or the planet Pluto. The Cyber Knights don't care. All they care about is that fine line between right and wrong. Basically, you know who said it best? And maybe I'm jumping ahead of myself. No, yes, I am not jumping ahead of myself, and I'm sorry. Whichever, well, we'll get to that in a second. They are the champions of the underdog. These are the guys that you want to go to school with your children so your children don't get bullied. That's who they are. It doesn't matter if your ideals are right or wrong. If you're being bullied, they're going to help you. That's the basic underlying theme premise of what a Cyber Knight is. With that said, not all Cyber Knights are the same. And the Coalition War, the war on Tolkien, the alignment with Tolkien affects that balance. Nothing in Cyber Knight history is more pivotal than this book and the moment in time shared at the fall or during the siege of Tolkien. Now, back to them being bullies. The Pope said it best. I cannot remember which pope it is. I will try and look it up and put the quote in my comments. But basically, the pope was talking about perfect pacifism. Perfect pacifism is an ideal that in a perfect world can be upheld and defended. If you don't live in a perfect world, people are going to be selfish and they're going to take from the weaker. That's just the way it is. I'm not going to say it's human nature, but that's just the way it works. People use force to do things. There are a lot of people that don't do that, and I'm just being a reference to the fact that there are people out there who need defended. And basically, the Pope came out of his shell. Well, I shouldn't say it like that. He's a very respected individual. The Pope said, perfect pacifism is not a stance that we can take because it's our duty as Christians. He might have said Catholics. Like I said, I don't remember the quote. To stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. And that is basically what the Cyber Knights are doing. If you don't have the ability to defend yourself against a wizard, they're going to help you with the problem. That's what they do. They're true servants, or maybe depending on how you look at it, you could say that they might be prisoners of hope and freedom, because they have no expectations of desire or reward. And with that being said, they could be really poor. Because they don't go into a place and say, we're going to free your village of the evil demons that are attacking you and expect you to pay them rent the rest of your lives. And now, because of this balance that they have, they're kind of elevated by the common folk of Rift's Earth to a godlike state, but they're humble enough to acknowledge that they're not gods. That's what makes them what they are. Now, before the Coalition Wars Cyber Knights book, all I had to go off of, all I ever read on Cyber Knights was the core book, and I thought that Cyber Knights were kind of lame. Now there are some cool things. There are cooler things in here too. But back to the story. Like okay, wait, no, I can't leave it hanging like that. There's some new armor in here. There's a lot more fluff to the character background of Cyber Knights, and we're gonna start touching upon some of that anyway. But the war on Tolkien forever scars the Cyber Knights, because it's the first time that the Cyber Knights ever organized in political affairs as like an allegiance type of thing. And it creates a schism within the Cyber Knights. And the book really gives you an in-depth overview of the culture. In fact, there is a huge, other notable, it's right here somewhere, Lord Croak. There's a huge section on Lord Croak. Croak. Lord Croak. Maybe he should croak. I don't know. But it gives you an in-depth culture, and it talks about notable peoples. It gives you a breakdown of the culture, right down to percentage by race, which Palladium likes to do from time to time. And then they get into a lot more detail on the OCC. In fact, to give you an idea, the book is roughly 50-ish pages. 109 pages, so I was way off. And pages 18 to 32 are all about the Cyber Knight OCC. So that's like 18 pages. We'll just say it's 20 pages. So it's like, 20% of the book. Did I do my math right? Let me know. And then they go into a lot more detail with it, like they talk about the training, the Psi Sword, the cyber armor, which I never really paid much attention to before, but it's a lot cooler now with this book. And it talks about dream visions, and they suggest that you let the player come up with the dream visions, which is a good idea and a bad idea. And we'll get into that another time on Roleplay Ramblings. And then it breaks down the Society of Cyberknights by like class. I'm going to call them classes. They're not really classes, but they're a title. So there's courtiers, there's crusaders, and about half of all Cyberknights are courtiers. And these are noble warriors that are on like a lawful type of mission. And then there's crusaders that are on a crusade that they have voluntarily undertaken. That's about 30%. So most of your Cyberknights are true and loyal to what they believe, right? And then you have some champions, which these guys are, I kind of think of these guys as gladiators. They're arrogant, they're boastful, they don't really stand for the same ideals as the rest of the Cyberknights. And then there's Fallen Knights are mentioned and talked about. Like I said, they have Lord Coke and some other notable Cyberknights in the book. And then it finishes off with adventures and hooks. Now, we're going to go back. Blinding Flash! When Dion can see again, the witch is running away. And some Cyberknights are standing over the fallen body of one of their comrades. The knight that leapt in front of Sergeant Dion to protect him was none other than the Noli Bushman knight who not too long ago he was fighting. I mean, he actually says in his video to his wife, just 5 minutes ago we were enemies and now he's saving my life. Sergeant Dion is torn. Why, he asks. And then one of the female Cyberknights, good touch by the way, Kevin, in the writing, compassionately brushes the tears from Sergeant Dion's cheeks. And she says, quote, maybe he didn't see an enemy. And this is in response to Dion asking why. I'm the enemy, for God's sake. I'm the goddamn enemy. Maybe he didn't see an enemy. Perhaps he saw a man about to die a most cruel and unjust death, and he couldn't let it happen. That pretty much sums up the ideals of Cyberknights. Powerful little story. Now, what do I like and don't like about Coalition's form? Well, let's start with the don't likes first. There's not as many of them. And a couple of them are kind of I might go back and forth here a little bit because some are connected with the likes and the dislikes. I think for it to truly fit in the Cyberknights, Tolkien, Cyberknight, the Coalition Wars books, there needed to be more of the war in it and less about the Cyberknights. Or there just needed to be more in the war and as much about the Cyberknights. Plus, I wanted more Coalition / mages interaction with the Cyberknights in this book. That is a little, as far as furthering the Coalition's war campaign goes, I think the book falls short of doing that. Now, that doesn't mean in the next book it's not going to be relevant, because I haven't read that book yet. But as far as this book, from what I've read so far, you could take this out and do a history in a more in-depth book on the Cyberknights, and you'd be just fine. So if you're looking to play just the Coalition Wars and you're not going to include the Cyber Knights, you really probably don't need to purchase this book. Now, we're going to move to what I like, because there are some things that I like, and in order to understand what I dislike about one of them, we need to move to it. And that is the biggest thing I don't like about this book. It doesn't feel like it's a part of the progression of the Coalition Wars. It's an immense progression for the Cyber Knights, and I understand the logic as to why it was put where it was put, because it focuses on this point in time to create everything that happens for the Cyber Knights after this. Now, what I like, the complexity of the book and how it fits into the Coalition Wars. As much as I don't like the fact that there's not enough of the Coalition Wars, the fact that one moment created the whole book is pretty amazing in my mind. The Fallen. These are the Fallen Cyber Knights. I like it. It's a nice addition to the book, but I think that they were kind of just there and mentioned. Kind of like Fallen Paladins were mentioned way back in the concept of, I think it was they were first introduced in Dragon Magazine 2nd edition. They were brought up and they were just kind of shoved under. Now there's a little bit, it's not quite that bad here, but I think they need a little bit more meat, and in fact I think they need enough meat that they can have their own book. There's a ton of things that you can do with Fallen Cyber Knights, right? So there you go. There's a challenge for you, Kevin. I like the idea of the percentages. I like knowing which races were Cyber Knights and which ones weren't. How many Cyber Knights are elves. I like the fact that some of the Cyber Knights do things like joust. I thought that was kind of neat that they stuck with the knighthood to a little bit. Maybe I don't remember England well enough, but I would like to see maybe an English type of Cyber Knight book where they focus a little bit more on that type of English culture. Maybe not even a book, maybe just in the Rifter. And Dion's story was amazing. I loved, because his story really catches the struggle that the Cyber Knights face when looking at the differences between right and wrong. They no longer saw Dion. Well, they might have never seen Dion as a threat, but they certainly didn't see him as a threat, and they saw him as somebody who needed help, so they came to his aid. They set aside their differences, and they did just that. Again, I would like to have seen more interaction between the Cyber Knights and the Coalition guys, especially maybe like some Wilderness Scouts that are out, doing some of the shady work for the Coalition, but they get a whole different view of things. Maybe a Wilderness Scout could have been a friend of some of the Cyber Knights, or he's influenced a whole group of Coalition troops that are off in the danger zone in the wrong direction, and the Cyber Knights bring them back. I'm sure there's all kinds of stories like that. Oh, and then it's the best look at the Cyber Knights I've ever seen. I mean, I don't know if there's been another Cyber Knights book since. I can't think of one. But that's it. So it's got a price point of $16.95. It's, at this point, it's funny. As much as I don't like it being part of the Coalition's Wars campaign, it's probably my favorite book. Anyway, there you go, guys. Enjoy.